Hey everyone, I hope that each of you is doing well and staying safe during these crazy times. We are about 40 days into the Israel-Gaza war that commenced on October 7th. And today I want to give a bit of an update about what has been going on so far and also look forward to contemplate what Israel's plan is going to be, or what their plan seems to be now. Often when there are crises like this or wars abroad, I find that there is just such a litany of information that the press is reporting about, as they should, but it can become really dizzying and difficult to keep track of it and to place it all. So I just want you to know that one of the reasons why I've created Julie Noted, and one of the things that I care about so much in my show, is compiling all of the different information and putting it in one centralized location so that you can come here and I've done all of the work of the reading and data compiling so that you don't have to. So all of the facts that I am about to relay to you are really a conglomeration, of things that I have learned from many different sources. Haaretz in Israel, that's an Israeli publication that I have been consulting a lot with during the research that I've been doing. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Epoch Times, the Daily Wire, really any credible source that I can get my hands on. I'm reading all of their articles, and this is a hodgepodge of all of the information. So as I just said, I'm going to structure this video by dividing it into two parts. The first is a general update, and then the second part is looking ahead to ask, what is the plan? So let's start here with the update. In case you haven't been aware, and by the way, there are some people who are probably not aware, because there are people during this time who choose not to look at the news and keep themselves updated because it's too depressing, but you got to keep yourself updated because this is really important. But Israel has officially launched a ground invasion into Gaza. That started on October 27th. And the goal, at least stated by the IDF, is for Israel to take control of Gaza City. That is, if Gaza had a capital, would be the de facto capital of Gaza. It is a city in the north, and it is the urban center and also the terrorist stronghold of Gaza. It's where Hamas, the terrorist organization, has really been headquartered. So the Israeli army and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that their objective in this ground invasion is to destroy Hamas. Netanyahu said a few days ago that every single member of that terrorist group is, quote, a dead man. And so far, the IDF seems to have, thankfully, been pretty successful in targeting many Hamas terrorists and killing them. Many top generals and leaders of Hamas have been killed by IDF forces. Now, the White House said on Thursday, November 9th, 2023, that Israel has officially agreed to 4-hour daily pauses in fighting in the northern parts of Gaza. This has come amidst a really international push for a ceasefire. I'm sure that you have seen these protests, celebrities posting on their Instagram calling for a ceasefire. But Israel has said, no way. There is not going to be a ceasefire until Hamas is destroyed and all 240 of the hostages, which are being held in Gaza or by Hamas right now, are returned. So this is sort of a middle ground that Israel has agreed to for humanitarian purposes at the direction of the White House. So again, the White House has announced that Israel has agreed to daily 4-hour pauses in fighting in neighborhoods in northern Gaza to allow civilians to flee. What's happening is that a lot of civilians who lived in the north are fleeing south. And because, as mentioned, most of the fighting is going on in the north. So Israel has agreed to give 3-hour notices. They will announce 3 hours in advance. This is the neighborhood that we are going to have the 4-hour pause in. People should use this time to evacuate. The White House has also announced this is as of last week, that Israel has agreed to open a second evacuation corridor. This is along the coast of Gaza, again, to allow people to flee to the south. There have been millions of people in Gaza going from north to south, and I am not the only person to observe the irony in this, but many of them are going down Saladin Road. Now, those of you who watched my Islam 101 and Islam 101 Part 2 episodes on Timeless would know that Saladin was a crusader. He was one of the, I should say, maybe crusader's the wrong term, but he was one of the main main Muslims during the Crusades who fought to take over Christian lands, and he did so successfully. So he is hailed as a hero in the Muslim world. So it is a bit ironic and kind of a twist of history that many of these Palestinian Muslim individuals are fleeing down the road that is named after one of their heroes who resisted Western domination and sought to expel Christians and Jews from the region. According to the Hamas-controlled health ministry in Gaza, more than 11,000 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli ground invasion of Gaza. Now, many people have pointed out that that may not be an accurate number. Hamas often conflates numbers or misrepresents certain data in order to serve their side, but there does seem to be a terrible humanitarian crisis going on right now in Gaza, hence why the Israeli government, despite not agreeing to a ceasefire, has agreed, very generously, I might add, to these 4-hour daily pauses in fighting. So the population of Gaza was about 2 million people, actually a little bit over 2 million. And there are reports that 1.5 million people, this is according to the New York Times, which again, take it with a grain of salt. I am not the biggest fan of the New York Times, but sometimes their reporting, especially on international affairs, does seem to be credible. But there, according to the New York Times, about 1.5 million of the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza have been displaced from their homes amidst this Israeli invasion of Gaza. So I'm going to read to you right now some statistics, also from the New York Times. The New York Times got it from the World Health Organization about this humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But I'd like to pause for a moment and tell you something that I'm sure many of you listening can relate to, which is that this past weekend, I, on my Instagram, posted some of this data that I am about to convey to you, acknowledging that there, again, seems to be a terrible, terribly sad humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And what was so interesting was that I got some messages from people who were saying that my posting acknowledging this humanitarian crisis in Gaza somehow made me insufficiently pro-Israel. And a few weeks earlier, when I was posting all about Israel, the hostages, the people who were kidnapped, the Jews who were raped and massacred and slaughtered at the hands of Hamas, when I was posting about that, there were people commenting saying that I was unsympathetic to the plight of the Palestinians. People have lost their minds, okay? My acknowledging that there is a terrible humanitarian crisis in Gaza does not make me pro-Hamas. I hate Hamas. They are evil thugs who deserve to be eliminated and killed instantly. But still, this is a terrifically heartbreaking situation. And actually, I think that if you are anti-Hamas, you should be acknowledging the fact that Hamas has subjected their people to this kind of suffering. If Hamas had not launched that terrorist attack on Israel, Israel would not have invaded Gaza, and there wouldn't have been all of these issues. Also, Hamas uses many of these people as human shields, as we know. They don't care about their own people. They are actually shooting people, according to IDF reports, who are fleeing south. So again, it's just crazy to me that during this time, we can't just keep a level head and have sympathy for people who are suffering on both sides. And if you say that, then you are being called, I guess, pro-terrorist or insufficiently pro-Israel. Just wanted to vent about that for a moment. Again, I'm sure that many of you can relate. Now let's go into this data. Again, according to the New York Times, they are quoting the World Health Organization. Diarrhea, I'm reading from a New York Times article. Diarrhea, chickenpox, scabies, and upper respiratory infections are rampant in Gaza. Since mid-October, more than 33,000 cases of diarrhea have been reported. More than half of them among children younger than 5 years old. Before the war, again, according to the World Health Organization, there were 2,000 average monthly cases of diarrhea of children that age. So what's happening is that many of these people are living in close quarters. Disease is spreading. They are having inadequate access to food and water and proper health care because of this war, and it is creating this catastrophe. In recent weeks, 9,000 cases of scabies and lice have been reported in Gaza, more than 12,600 cases of skin rash, and nearly 55,000 cases of upper respiratory infections have proliferated. That is so sad. 1.5 million people, as I mentioned, have been displaced from their homes in Gaza. The UN estimates that over half of the housing in this territory has been damaged and destroyed. We're going to circle back to this because this is very important to note that as the Israeli forces are going in and trying to eliminate Hamas, as they should, there are these corresponding casualties and occurrences happening, which I think are going to make the post-war situation in Gaza be very, very difficult. Half of the housing in the territory has been destroyed. Many of those people obviously are not going to be able to go back to their houses. What is going to happen with those individuals? Again, we will go back to it. But the resultant refugee crisis of this war is, among many other things, one of the terrible outcomes. Okay, almost all of Gaza's 120 municipal water wells were expected to shut down this past weekend. There are some reports that they did shut down. There are some reports that they didn't. Again, more information is coming out about this. But there is a problem because fuel was depleted. This is according to the United Nations. And Israel has been heroic in aiding the Palestinians in Gaza because they care about those individuals. They don't want to cause them to suffer. But when Israel does give Palestinians in Gaza fuel, oftentimes what happens is that Hamas takes that fuel and uses it to power their rockets and uses it in retaliation against Israel. So it's this terrible, again, humanitarian situation where if Israel provides aid to many of the Palestinians, yes, in many cases it does go to those Palestinians, but in a lot of other cases it is co-opted by the very terrorist organization that Israel is trying to fight. Israel is really in an impossible situation. It is not a position for any reasons that I envy. And finally, another note on this humanitarian crisis. There are shelters in Gaza that are being run by UNRWA, that is the United Nations agency that aids Palestinian refugees, and they are apparently so overcrowded that an average of 160 people in these shelters are sharing a toilet, and there is also one shower for every 700 people. So it is not shocking that all of the aforementioned diseases and illnesses, diarrhea, chickenpox, scabies, upper respiratory infections, and lice and skin rashes have proliferated under these conditions. Now, Israel has acknowledged this humanitarian crisis. They have tried their best to give aid when appropriate. Also, I should mention that there were about 106 humanitarian trucks that crossed into Gaza on one day of last week. The United States has stated that their goal is to have 150 trucks go into Gaza a day. So there is some, though inadequate, humanitarian aid being given to these individuals. But the IDF really has seemed to try to go out of their way to prevent as many civilian casualties as possible. The IDF dropped and distributed leaflets warning people to flee and evacuate their homes before they bombarded those areas to get rid of Hamas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu repeated that there will be, quote, no ceasefire until our hostages have been released. But he did say in that same statement, quote, we once again call on the civilian population of Gaza to evacuate to the south. And the IDF tweeted, or I guess X'd, if that is now the proper verb. They tweeted on X, maybe is the right way to say it, quote, our war is with Hamas and not with the people of Gaza. So Israel deserves a lot of credit for this work that they are doing to try to diminish and prevent as many casualties as possible. Now, there has been this back and forth between the Biden administration and Netanyahu's government about a ceasefire. President Biden has said that he has, quote, asked for a pause in fighting longer than 3 days. And he also said, this is last Monday, the 6th of November, that he asked Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to pause the air and ground campaign. But again, Netanyahu's government has come back and said, we will agree to 4-hour daily pauses. We will agree to open a second evacuation corridor for the Palestinians in the north of Gaza to flee to the south, but we are not going to agree to a ceasefire. Understood. Israel has said that they have destroyed more than 130 tunnel entrances of Hamas's since the beginning of the war. This is, again, according to the New York Times. If that is true, that is a big win for Israel because the Hamas tunnel apparatus is very strong. It's been a way for them to sneak into Israel, a way for them to avoid targeted drone strikes by the IDF. So it is very good that the IDF has seemed to have eliminated many of those, of that underground infrastructure. And what's also been very interesting, alongside the reports of how many Hamas leaders have been killed, how many tunnels have been destroyed, have been some of the items that IDF forces have discovered in the homes of Palestinians in Gaza and Hamas terrorists and their families. One such item, according to the IDF, was an Arabic version of Mein Kampf. That was Hitler's manifesto in which he argued about the necessity of exterminating the Jewish population. So the IDF said that they found a copy of Mein Kampf translated into Arabic in a children's room in Gaza. You can look this up. There are photos online that they took of passages that were highlighted and notes that were made in Mein Kampf. So it really shows you the intellectual state of the people who Israel is rightfully fighting against. So that is the update portion of the video. Now let's transition into this question that really haunts me, honestly, and has so captured my attention, which is, where is this going? Now, before we get into that, I would like to spend a moment re-explaining or reiterating what Hamas's goals are and what Hamas is all about. Because in order to look to the future, we have to understand the enemy and what the enemy thinks, believes, and wants. And people have been talking about this, but there seems still to be a terrific amount of ignorance and a huge lack of understanding among the American populace in general about what Hamas, again, is really about, okay? The Mein Kampf in the children's room probably is a sadly good indicator of what Hamas is all about, and that is that they are exterminationist. They want to see the annihilation of the Jewish population. This is not for them about retaking land. In a sense it is. They want to see the state of Israel be eradicated. But we have to understand, and a staggering amount of people don't understand this, is that Hamas is fundamentally anti-Jewish and exterminationist. There was a really, really powerful and well-explained op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that I'd like to highlight for you. See, all of these sources that I'm giving you are, again, a hodgepodge of all of the things I've been reading. This was by a Georgetown professor, Ed Hussein. And he wrote, again in the Wall Street Journal, the title of this op-ed is called The Theology of Hamas. He wrote, Hamas is not only a terrorist group and a Palestinian nationalist movement, it is also a religious organization incubated by the Egypt-based Muslim Brotherhood. For those who don't know about Muslim Brotherhood, as I just said, it is Egypt-based. It was founded in Egypt in 1928, and it was really a militant group that was created to reestablish a caliphate, but a vehemently anti-Western Sharia-based caliphate to resist the West. Okay, so Hamas is an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood, and in Hamas's charter is an affirmation of their exterminationist principles against the Jews. I'd like to read to you some parts of Hamas's charter. Again, credit to Ed Hussein for putting this in the Wall Street Journal. It is something that every single American should be aware of, especially those Americans who chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Here are parts of the charter. They declare that, quote, Islam will destroy Israel because Palestine is an Islamic land, and it is the individual duty of every Muslim to liberate it. I will continue. Article 7 of the Charter declares that, quote, the day of judgment in Islam will not come about until Muslims kill the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, quote, O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Okay, that is pretty explicit. The day of judgment will not come about until the Muslims kill the Jews. Pretty exterminationist. Hamas, interestingly, I didn't know this until I read Ed Hussein's op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. Hamas has actually been banned from officially organizing in many surrounding Arab/Muslim states, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt. Even Hamas is too militant for many of those governments. Hamas leader Mahmoud Zahar said that Palestine is merely, quote, a toothbrush in our pocket, which means that Palestine is one kind of proxy war, if you will, in a much larger campaign that Hamas is endeavoring to bring into fruition, which will, again, establish this Muslim Sharia law-based anti-Western caliphate to really not only rival, but destroy the West. I think I just sort of sounds like I said the rest, but I meant to say the West, okay? So now that we understand that in the charter of Hamas and fundamentally in the lifeblood of this organization is an exterminationist desire against Jews, let us continue here with this very, very difficult question of what is next for Israel. I think that every reasonable person understands why Israel would want to destroy Hamas. Obviously, Israel, as a Jewish country, is going to want to destroy and eliminate the terrorist organization which wants to exterminate them and their people. My question is, what is the plan? What are the next steps for Israel once they do eliminate Hamas? Again, I have to say it many times because there will be people who will come at me and accuse me of all sorts of things. I agree that Hamas must be eliminated. They need to be done away with as soon as possible, or these terrorist attacks and these exterminationist acts will continue. Understood. But once that happens, once Hamas is eliminated, and I have every confidence that the IDF, with all of its technological and military capabilities, will be able to do that. Once Hamas is eliminated, what is going to happen in Gaza? Now, there have been some discussions made public, apparently, between the Biden administration and leaders in the Palestinian Liberation Organization and other heads of government in the surrounding region. For instance, the head of Qatar has been involved in these talks about what would happen in a post-war Gaza, what the governance might look like. Let's go through some of these and then really discuss their viability. Jake Sullivan, who is a national security advisor for President Biden, told CNN, this is according to Haaretz, which, by the way, I might add, posts people should subscribe to the Haaretz email list, because every single day they give bullet points of the latest updates in the Israel-Gaza war, and I have found them to be very helpful and concise. So shout out to that Haaretz email list. According to Haaretz, Jake Sullivan told CNN that there should be unified political leadership in the West Bank and Gaza, okay? He said that Egypt, the United States, and Qatar are currently engaging in, quote, active, intensive negotiations to release the hostages that are being held by Hamas and to pave the way for this unified rule in the West Bank and Gaza. Okay, so what would this unified rule look like? For those who don't know the map of Israel, the West Bank is on the right side and Gaza is completely separated and on the other side. So it's not like these territories are unified. They're certainly close together, but they're separated by Israel. So there's that geography problem. And then, of course, there's also the problem of what many members of the population want. And many members of the population actually don't want to see unified political rule in the West Bank and Gaza. So what would that look like? Well, the Biden administration, among others, have proposed that the Palestinian Authority might come back and rule Gaza. The Palestinian Authority is the political governance, if you will, government organization, which now rules the West Bank. And it actually used to be in control of Gaza from 2005 to 2007. Israel gave the territory of the Gaza Strip over to the Palestinian Authority in 2005. But then in 2007, Hamas, the exterminationist terrorist organization, came in, knocked the Palestinian Authority out of Gaza, and took over control. Okay, so just to state the obvious, what makes the Biden administration think that this time will be different, that won't happen again? Allow me to read to you some of the discussions between the Palestinian Authority and the Biden administration. The head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is essentially the same thing, or very much related to the Palestinian Authority, Hussein al-Sheikh, has told the Biden administration that they are open to governance in post-Hamas Gaza if the United States and Israel agree to certain terms and concessions, okay? So according to the New York Times, al-Sheikh told Secretary of State Anthony Blinken that they sought, quote, a commitment from the United States administration with a comprehensive political decision that would include the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. So basically what this means, and this is indeed also specified by al-Sheikh, is that Gaza and the West Bank will be ruled by the Palestinian Authority if Israel withdraws its civilian population and military presence from the West Bank, and if the political status of East Jerusalem is fully ceded to the Palestinian Authority. Okay, the Palestinians regard East Jerusalem as their capital. There are Muslims, Jews, and Christians living in Jerusalem. It is obviously a holy site for all of those religions involved, and it is a point of huge contest and political disagreement about who should and who does rule over Jerusalem. So let's look at this first concession that the Palestinian Authority is saying has to be met in order for them to take over Gaza. They're saying that Israel has to withdraw its civilian and military population from the West Bank. But okay, let's be real. Is that really going to happen? And by the way, should that happen? My answer to both is no. Right now, there are 700,000 Jewish settlers who live in the West Bank. Many of them are Orthodox Jews, and they purposefully live in the West Bank because they want that territory to be under Israeli control, and they want to settle in that region so as to have a presence there from Israel, even if Israel can't take full control of the West Bank, in order to prevent Hamas and other terrorist organizations from coming in and having control of the West Bank. Whether or not you agree with the issue of settlements, and it is one of the biggest sources of contention in Israel, this topic, whether or not Jews, and specifically Orthodox Jews, should be able to settle in the West Bank. Putting that aside, if we are just speaking realistically, whether we like it or not, there are close to 1 million Jewish settlers who live in the West Bank right now. Is it really realistic to have all of them evacuate and get out of the West Bank, move their homes, move their families, and go back to Israel? It doesn't seem to be realistic. And again, as I indicated, there are many people who say, and I am sympathetic to this argument, that they shouldn't evacuate the West Bank, because if the West Bank is fully under Palestinian control, there might be a large likelihood that the same thing will happen in the West Bank as happened in Gaza, that the government or the people who are in charge there are going to be replaced by Hamas specifically and other exterminationist terrorist groups, okay? So far, it's just staggering to see how unrealistic these proposals are, as much as we may want them. And again, I'm not even sure we would want them, but they are just pie in the sky at this point. And by the way, interestingly, Al-Sheikh, again, the Palestinian Liberation Organization Secretary General, acknowledged that there would be a likelihood that if the Palestinian Authority did take over post-Hamas Gaza, that they might be replaced by Hamas terrorists as they were in 2007 or another terrorist organization. Al-Sheikh said, quote, "Without a comprehensive political initiative from the United States, a post-war Gaza would be, quote, a fertile soil for radicalism." Now, President Biden has said that there has to, quote, be a vision of what comes next. In our view, it has to be a two-state solution. Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, said in Tokyo on the 9th of November last week that, quote, "The Palestinian people's voices and aspirations must be at the center of the post-crisis governance in Gaza. It must include Palestinian-led governance and Gaza unified with the West Bank under Palestinian Authority." But again, as great as some of these things may sound, it just does not seem realistic. And certainly Netanyahu's government is not going to agree to it. So the question here is, what is the plan? It is not viable for the Palestinian Authority to rule over Gaza. People are saying, including Israel, is saying that there will probably be a military occupation of Gaza by Israel. But again, I ask the question, how is that going to fare? For 40 years, Israel militarily occupied Gaza, from like the 60s after the Six-Day War to 2005. And there was never peace there because the population in the Gaza Strip does not want to be under Israeli rule. They have been brainwashed into thinking that Jews are dogs and pigs and that Israel are these, European colonial occupiers, and they hate them with a burning passion. Many of those individuals, not all, but many, would rather be dead than have their Western Jewish occupier, in blinking quotation marks, rule over them, okay? And so we have to understand that and look at history and know that that Israeli military occupation has historically not worked out. And we also see other indicators from history that oftentimes these military occupations also don't work out. To give some examples, and I understand that these situations are much different from the situation in Israel and that Israel faces with Hamas, but nevertheless, we can learn from them. The British were in Northern Ireland. They basically had a military occupation of Northern Ireland for 30 years, from 1969 to 1998. And they had 2/3 of the population of Northern Ireland on their side. And still, they couldn't make a go of it because there was, even though it was just a third, that third of the population, which hated the British, so badly wanted them out that over time they prevailed and the British had to withdraw. We know from American invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan that it may be great and needed and justified to get rid of the bad guys Saddam Hussein and the Taliban, respectively. But then the American continued presence in the region without a really robust plan doesn't seem to work out and seems to inspire a lot of hatred among the population against the military presence. So look, am I a military expert? No. Am I very well read on these issues and hopefully thoughtful about them? Yes, but I am not claiming to be an expert on this. But I am merely asking the question, which does not seem to be asked, what is the plan going forward? Again, it's a totally different situation. I understand that Hamas needs to be eliminated. But we know from history that much of the population in the Gaza Strip is not going to be happy about Israel controlling them. And certainly the surrounding populations, the Iranian government, the Syrian government, to the extent that there is one now, the other surrounding Muslim nations are also not going to be particularly happy to see Israeli military forces occupying Gaza. Just something to throw out, to think about. We're so much in the thick of this war. Everyone is so rightfully disgusted and angry and incensed at Hamas and wants them eliminated. But we've also got to look for the future, to the future, I should say. Before we continue, I want to tell you about MyPillow. I use many MyPillow products. I walk into work every day wearing the My slippers, and then I quickly change into heels. I sleep on the MyPillow and the Giza Dream bed sheets, and I use My towels, among other products. And you can get many of these products at a discount if you use the promo code Hartman. MyPillow's latest deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you'll get 60% off of the aforementioned Giza Dream bed sheets. That comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You'll get a set for as low as $39.99 with the promo code Hartman. Just go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman. Along with this offer, you'll get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow mattress topper, the MyPillow towel sets, and more. And on a final note, I'd like to quickly contemplate what this war in Israel means for the United States, and specifically what it might portend in the 2024 election. Now, the October 7th attack on Israel, people are saying, is looking really bad for President Biden. Why? Because it is the second war to occur under his presidency. The first was Putin's invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, and then this is the second one, Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel. And also because just a few weeks before Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel, the Biden administration gave the green light to unfreeze $6 billion in assets that would go into the hands of the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime is the most vehemently anti-Israel regime on the planet, alongside Hamas, although Hamas is not a regime, it is a terrorist group. And Israel funds Hezbollah and also worked with Hamas to A, financially support them in this attack, and B, they helped them plan the attack. They gave the okay for Hamas to go forward with it the Monday before October 7th in Beirut. So this calamity in the Middle East may serve to harm President Biden's reelection chances. Also, because Donald Trump is likely to be the nominee for the Republican Party, people are saying that this Middle East calamity may give more support to President Trump, because during the 4 years that he was in office, not only were there no wars, but also he gave a lot of support to Israel and also helped facilitate a historic normalization of relations between Israel and many of the surrounding Muslim nations. That was known as the Abraham Accords. So yes, this could serve to harm President Biden, but also there are an equal amount of people who are saying that actually the Biden administration's response to this war may serve to benefit President Biden and increase his reelection chances in 2024. Interestingly, President Biden's support of Israel has been one of the most universally popular things in his presidency. There is a particularly young contingent of the Democratic Party, which is incensed at President Biden for supporting Israel. But most Americans, especially older Americans, are very pro-Israel. So both Democrats and Republicans have been pleased with President Biden, as they should be, for his providing military and weaponry aid to Israel, and also for his speeches in which he has been very pro-Israel and anti-Hamas. So in my judgment, it will really depend how this conflict shakes out. If President Biden can prevent this conflict from spinning out of control, if essentially the status quo continues, then I think that it will probably serve to benefit him in 2024. However, if this conflict does spin out of control, and a lot can happen in the next 360 days, then I think that it will be a big boost to President Trump, and many people, including Democrats, might see this as one of the biggest reasons to not have President Biden return to office. A lot to keep track of, a lot of things to think about. I so appreciate your being here. My heart goes out to both Israelis and Palestinians who are suffering during this conflict, and I just hope for the best possible outcome for every single person involved. And I thank you very much for being here. I'd also like to encourage you on a final note to comment down below with what you think, especially on this question that, as I said, so haunts me of what is the plan for Israel going forward? What are the next steps? I'd be very curious to hear your responses. Stay well, everyone. I'll see you soon.